A Korean family is becoming extinct over time due to an unknown curse. To remove this curse, a 100-year-old coffin must be removed from the grave, but no one knew that one after another, the mystery would come out to lift the coffin. I was talking about the newly released masterpiece horror Korean movie Exhuma, which is discussed worldwide. Bong-gil and her senior Hwa-rim are going to Los Angeles from Korea. A real estate businessman named Park sent them for a special reason. After landing at the airport, the Park assistant brought them straight to the hospital. Park's newborn baby is in the ICU. The child is sick from birth. All the big doctors of the city are unable to cure him despite giving medicine. After reading some rituals, Hwa-rim comes to know that this child was cursed by his dead grandfather 100 years ago. Every elder and newborn in Park's family has been suffering from this problem for a long time. It happened to his brother first, which caused him to commit suicide in a mental hospital a few days later. But after her death, the curse now preys on Park and her new baby, and it's hereditary. When you close your eyes, it seems that someone is screaming in pain, and when night falls, it is a nightmare. Hwa-rim reads some of his rituals and looks at this house, saying that it is cursed by the family's dead grandfather. This is called onstal call in their language. That is, their deceased great-grandfather is in trouble for some reason and has been cheated. In fact, Park's family is Korean, but later they moved to America, but the grave of his grandfather is in Korea. Hwa-rim says there is a way to escape this curse, but for that he needs two grave experts, Do-hyun and Jae-hyun. Let me explain a little here that this science originated in Korea, and Japan is known by different names all over the world. For example, according to the Hindus, the Pasta Shastra. In Korea, through this science, determining the direction of a house and cemetery indicates the good time and way to live a good life. Do-hyun and Jae-hyun work together and have known Hwa-rim for a long time. Hwa-rim consults them about the whole matter and tells them that the possible cause of Park's grandfather's curse is that he was not buried properly, and that the entire family shifted to America after he was buried in Korea. Even after death, grandfather's soul got angry because of not following any rules. So he should be taken out of the grave and reburied following all the rules. However, others in the house do not believe in this and are not willing to exhume the ancestor from the grave, but Park is determined to do it. Being a noble family of the city, the Park asks and conditions to keep the matter a secret. First of all, no private or government organization should be able to know about the removal of the body. Second, the body cannot be removed from the coffin. Thirdly, the coffin should be picked up and buried within that day following all the rules. Do-hyun finds the conditions suspicious, but leaves without further ado for Park City. But he was surprised when he reached the grave, because the place was in a deserted forest on a mountain near the border of Japan and Korea. They do not understand the reason why the man of the noble family was buried in such a place. Besides, a random number was written in place of the name on the stone. When asked about this, Park said that his grandfather was a Korean general, so he was buried here according to a Korean monk. Because at that time there were thieves in the grave. Therefore, arrangements were made to make grandfather's grave as simple as possible and keep it hidden from the eyes. But fear and doubt are growing in Do-hyun's mind. His experience says that there is power of evil spirits here. On top of that, it is inauspicious to raise a dead person from the grave. After all, the presence of foxes around the grave made things more interesting. In Japanese mythology, this fox is said to be a symbol of auspicious energy. It is regarded as a protective guardian in Japan, but in some places it is considered an evil force. Park said that there were two children before, but they died, and after suffering, this child is also suffering from the pain of death, so he requests to save the child. Do-hyun asks Mr. Park, "You are hiding a lot from me." He also said that the writing on the grave is not a random number but refers to the latitude and longitude. But lifting the body from the grave without knowing anything, and it's like calling your own death. So in my opinion, that monk gave this grave knowingly. It was then that Hwa-rim suggested that in this case they could use this fill replacing technique. In this case, little rituals should be done to reduce the negative energy of that place, so that the balance of negative and positive energy is maintained. This requires 5 dead pigs and 5 people whose birth year and pigs must be in the same birth year. Park's PC was against it, but he was present at the scene. Finally, the ritual begins. During the ritual, the first 3 blows on the grave are done in the park. After that, the 5 started walking around the grave. And Hwa-rim was stabbing the dead pigs. After walking like this for a long time, he finally found a royal coffin. These royal coffins were once used by kings. Then Jae-hyun prepared to bury it in Los Angeles. One of the 5 men saw a strange snake while fixing the soil of the grave, which had no head. In order to kill the snake in fear, a woman's head appeared for a moment in place of the snake's head. According to the Japanese, these are called nirna. That is, the neuron has the head of a woman and the body of a snake. As soon as the man killed the snake, the sky turned into heavy clouds and heavy rain started in Japan. It is said that if you bury someone on a rainy day, the dead person's soul does not go to heaven, so the body is secretly kept in an empty hospital morgue until the rain stops. The caretaker of the morgue was amazed at the craftsmanship of the coffin. His eyes sparkled with lust. Meanwhile, Dae-wook went alone to the temple next to the mountain to get rid of the doubt. One can know by meeting a person. This temple is more than 100 years old, and their lineage is associated with this temple from ancient times till today. When Dae-wook asked the man about the grave and the monk, he found out that there was no one with this name, but there are several rumors about the grave. It is said that it is the grave of the richest person in North Korea, where the treasure is hidden. For this reason, even though the graves were infested with thieves at one time, several earthen tools were found there. But the thieves were never found, as if someone is guarding the grave. When the caretaker of the morgue secretly tried to open the coffin, the invisible force came out, as a result of which Hwa-rim's nose bleeds. The hospital's Dae-wook actually tells him that a strong negative energy came out of that coffin, which is the spirit of Park's great-grandfather himself. One night Park's father sat alone. Suddenly, a cold voice called out from outside the door. "How are you? Open the door and let me come?" When the cold air enters the room to open the door, it can be seen that the spirit of Park's grandfather stood up and said in a sarcastic voice that the traitors are fine. At the end of the speech, the spirit of Thakurdata strangled Park's parents. Hwa-rim tells Dae-wook everything and asks him to save Park because their family didn't pray for the peace of grandfather's soul, and didn't even go to the grave after his death to offer food. So that soul is killing everyone. Meanwhile, Dae-wook calls Park and tells him not to open the door until he goes to the hotel. Just then, Dae-wook's voice from outside the door says to open the door. And in a scared voice, Park asked on the phone whether you are calling from outside. Dae-wook on the other side of the phone says a lot happened after opening your grandpa's coffin. So if you want to live, open the window and let it come in, otherwise you will die. As Park opens the window, Dae-wook's voice on the phone turns into Grandpa's voice. He realizes that he has made a big mistake. In fact, according to Japanese mythology, a spirit processes someone only when he or she invokes it through will or action. And Park opened the door and allowed him to enter. Park process becomes. On the other hand, Dae-wook entered and saw Park standing on the table. And here the secret of Park's family being so rich is revealed. In 1894, when the Japanese army invaded Korea, Park's grandfather committed treason and sided with the Japanese for money and power. That's why they got so rich. But they came to America without praying for their grandfather. Grandpa killed Park immediately. Grandpa's spirit reached straight to kill the kid in the park. Dae-wook understands that there is no profit in burial. Rather, to save the child, the coffin should be burned right away. Otherwise, none of this child and Park's family will survive. So Dae-wook burns the coffin, and the soul of the great-grandfather disappeared forever. But do all the problems end here? Meanwhile, Dae-wook finds out that the man has been very ill since opening the grave that day. So when Dae-wook meets her, she says that even if she sees a doctor, there is no benefit. She gets nightmares and screams at night. So the man tells Dae-wook to find the snake and cremate it. That is, New Donal was being talked about here. After going to the grave of the Park's grandfather, after a little search, he was shocked to find the body of the neuron divided into 2 parts. If you hit the ground with a shovel to cut the soil, it hits something hard below. Di-wook starts digging the grave. Then another strange type of coffin came out. As soon as this news was given to the others, they rushed to the spot and took out a strange giant coffin about 9 to 10 feet long and covered with barbed wire. Remarkably, when the coffin was lifted, the foxes and other animals present moved away. Now the question is, what is the reason for this barbed wire entanglement? They keep that coffin inside the temple tonight with a pot of enchanted rice and horse blood. When Di-wook meets Park's aunt and inquires about his father's grave, it is revealed that the monk was not Korean but a Japanese monk. Real name Ji-shun Lee. It is heard that this monk was very aware of the geographical location of Korea, but the question here is that if Park's grandfather betrayed his country and helped Japan, why did the Japanese monk do this to him? After dinner everyone falls asleep, but Hwa-rim sits alone remembering his dead grandmother, who also had powers like Hwa-rim. Then in the middle of the night Bong-gil notices the man from the temple standing on his chest muttering that he took my liver. His whole body is deeply wounded. When the Bong-gil spell fell, there was no one. When he has doubts, he comes to the temple alone to check. Terrible screams from inside the door. Bong-gil got cold when he saw something through the tin gap. A 9-foot-tall man grabbed the temple man's head and tore it off. Somehow Bong-gil comes and calls Hwa-rim, and Hwa-rim's grandmother stops him and Hwa-rim runs towards the temple. As soon as they opened the door of the temple and entered, they were stunned with fear, because someone has ripped off the coffin lid, and the upper canopy is broken. Hwa-rim sends Bong-gil to wake everyone up, and Hwa-rim goes to the coffin and finds a Japanese samurai helmet. Just then he heard the sound of heavy footsteps outside, and then a tall and wide ghoul stood in front of the door, who said in a terrible voice, "Human or not, what did you bring for dinner? Sweet fish?" Hwa-rim bowed his head and answered, "I am not a man. Your servant." "Excuse me, I am preparing food right away," then chases Hwa-rim. To save Bong-gil Hwa-rim, if an iron rod is inserted into the stomach of the demon, it cannot penetrate his body. By now, both of them froze in fear, seeing the full form of the ghost. His eyes have been gouged out, and the whole face was burning. The ghoul squeezes Bong-gil's head into his stomach and tears him unconscious. The ghoul slowly moved towards Hwa-rim, and the ghoul stopped suddenly as Hwa-rim backed away in fear, seeing Hwa-rim sitting on a holy stone. In fact, this mantra stone is used to hold the remains of a monk after his death. The ghoul saw this and cast a spell, turning into a ball of fire and flying through the air. After staying like this for a while, the ghoul moved to the Park's grandfather's grave on the hill. The latter admitted everyone to the hospital. Bong-gil regains consciousness, but condition is not good. By then the news is on TV that the reporter is saying the incident was caused by a wild bear attack. Hwa-rim is very worried about tomorrow's incident because ghosts don't have bodies, and they don't wear shadows, but this ghoul had both. That is, this ghost means Ani, according to Japanese mythology. It is said that when the worst people die, they turn into Oni, or ghouls, due to a curse. Di-wook decides on this incident, when everything started for him, so the termination will do itself. As a result, he left alone for the purpose of the temple, started researching old books kept there. On the other hand, when Hwa-rim calls his sister for help, Bong-gil smiles mysteriously and says that he is coming. Meanwhile, Di-wook goes to Park's grandfather's grave, and digging the grave saw that ghost is sleeping. That is, he stays here during the day and comes alive at night. When Di-wook's doubts are cleared, he returns to the hotel and reveals the real secret. In ancient times, Japanese black monk experts buried some enchanted iron rods in certain places in Korea to end the power of Korea. The grave robbers that Park had told them about were not thieves, but the ones who were bringing out the enchanted iron rod to save Korea and ending the curse. But the last enchanted iron rod was never found. This ghost means Ani. Mantraput stands guard at that particular place to protect the iron rod from humans. With that, Hwa-rim also realizes that Bong couldn't beat Lee, only for having a Korean enchanted tattoo on his body. So now to save Bong-gil must kill the ghost. And for the sake of Korea, that enchanted iron rod must be lifted. So now according to the plan, Hwa-rim's sister will be with Bong-gil and Hwa-rim, Jae-hyun, D-wook will go to the ghost's grave. All of them wear enchanted tattoos on their bodies to protect themselves. Now wait only for the night. The plan was for Hwa-rim to trick the ghoul out of the grave and kill or weaken it using enchanted blood. And on this occasion they will both dig the grave and remove the enchanted iron stick. Sweet fish bait is given for this. Work is done accordingly. When the ghoul wakes up, the Hwa-rim is chased by the smell of sweet fish and they start digging the grave. But after 100 attempts, the enchanted iron rod cannot be found. Meanwhile, Hwa-rim was not able to hold back the demon. When the ghost tries to kill Hwa-rim, the grandmother's spirit saves him and the ghost does nothing. Because he was the only one who protected the grave from people. Hwa-rim runs into Jae-hyun when he finds out that they found nothing in the grave. And then seeing the ghost turned into a ball of fire and going towards the grave. That is, D-wook's life is at risk. D-wook sees his death slowly approaching. Because today is his last day. Then the demon put his hand on his back and said, "Do you want to obey me or give me your liver?" After that, the demon plunged its sharp clawed fingers into D-wook's stomach. To save D-wook, Hwa-rim soaks the blood of the enchanted horse and sprinkles it on the ghoul, causing the ghoul's whole body to burn. And with this incident, the real secret of the ghost is revealed. During the Korean-Japanese War, a Japanese monk cut off the head of a Japanese general and sewed the parts of various animals to his whole body. In addition, a burning iron rod stained with the blood of 10,000 Koreans was inserted into the general's body and his head was sewn. Then buried in the ground, that is, this last enchanted iron rod is inserted not elsewhere but inside the body of the demon. Then Park's grandfather was buried on the grave. Because the monk knew that no one would lift the coffin of Park's great-grandfather from the grave due to being an aristocratic family. But when Neurona, the strange snake, dies with grandfather's body found in the park, the first guard moves. And in Japanese mythology, Neurona is compared to water. And the coffin was made of wood. It is taken from the earth. And fire. The fiery enchanted iron that was in the ghoul because the metal was burned and inserted into his body. So the demon wakes up due to the distortion of these 5 elements. If you understand the whole thing by now, D-wook was completing the circle of the 5 elements and finally hit with all his power, slicing the demon in half. And wounded D-wook fell down.